Very good morning to all of you, my dear students. So now in this third session, we are going to discuss something about hormones and hormonal antagonists and miscellaneous agents that are used in the management of cancer. Okay, let us see. So session 3. So I'm going to cover these topics under this session, that is hormonal and anti-hormonal drugs, miscellaneous agents, radioactive isotopes, stem cell transplantation, gene therapy, cancer vaccines, and prevention of cancer. So hormones and anti-hormonal drugs, let us see. So this is the classification that we have, that is corticosteroids, prednisolone, estrogens, ethinyl estradiol, selective estrogen receptor modulators like tamoxifen, toremifene, and selective estrogen receptor down regulators like fulvestrant, aromatase inhibitors like letrozole, anastrozole, exemestane, and progesterones like hydroxyprogesterone, and anti-androgens like flutamide, and 5-alpha reductase inhibitors like finasteride, and GnH are analogs like goserelin and leuprolide are used. Hormones and anti-hormonal drugs. Some cancers arise from cell lines with steroid receptors, and steroid hormones do cause remissions in certain types of cancers. Okay. They usually do not eradicate the disease, but can alleviate the symptoms for a long period and do not depress the bone marrow. This is the best advantage that we can have with these molecules, but they are not used in each and every cancer, of course. Hormone antagonists. Several types of hormone-dependent cancers like endometrial, breast, prostate cancers respond to treatment with their corresponding hormonal antagonists. Like, for example, estrogen antagonists are used in the management of breast cancer. Androgen antagonists are used in the management of prostate cancer. And corticosteroids are used in the management of lymphocytic leukemias and lymphomas. Then coming to the estrogens. They are physiological antagonists of androgens. Carcinoma of the prostate is androgen dependent. So we go for anti-androgen therapy. They inhibit anti-androgen therapy means estrogens also have the anti-androgenic action. So they inhibit the effect of endogenous androgens in androgen-dependent metastatic prostatic carcinoma. That is, most commonly used molecule with this action is diethylstilbestrone, DES. So treatment here is for prostatic cancer, bilateral oophorectomy is done along with administration of estrogens. So synthetic estrogens, if we can use, they are effective and somewhat cost effective also, that is cheaper. Diethylstilbestrol is administered in the dose of 5 mg TID for several days and then reduced to 1 mg TID. ADR are sexual impotence and gynecomastia because we are administering estrogens in males. And sexual impotence is because of anti-androgenic action. Forfesterol, that is prodrug, phosphate derivative of stilbestrol, dose to be given is 600 to 1200 mg IV initially, later 120 to 240 mg orally. Adverse drug effects with this molecule are cardiac and cerebrovascular complications, gynecomastia, and carcinoma of male breast. So here you can see estrogens getting metabolized into various metabolic products. Then mitochondrial respiration and replication stress, ROS system is stimulated. Then disruption of DDR, inhibition of DNA repair machinery. So suppress DNA damage repair. So ultimately all these effects because of the ROS activation, so DNA damage can be there and tumorigenesis can be there. So this is inhibitor here. This step is inhibitor with the usage of estrogens in this case. Then let us see first what do these estrogens do to our body. There are beneficial effects as well as harmful effects. Beneficial effects means because of the presence of estrogens in the body, women can have the milk production from the breast after delivery, and then there is like a liver and heart controls cholesterol, and then preparation of uterus for fetus, and then preserve strength of the bone. Then harmful effects are In case of breast, there is increased cancer risk, and also in case of uterus even. So we have two types of estrogen receptors in the body, ER1 or ER2. That is each estrogen receptor, I mean not 1 and 2, it is estrogen receptor alpha and beta. Both subtypes expressed by most tissues. So this is like they are predominant. Estrogen receptor alpha is predominant in uterus, vagina, breast, bone, hypothalamus, and blood vessels, whereas estrogen receptor beta is predominantly seen in prostate gland of males and ovaries in case of females. E2 binds to both receptors with equal affinity. Certain glands or types of estrogens have differing affinity. These receptors have different patterns of interaction with co-activators and co-repressors. So they both differ in their mechanisms of actions. Then coming to the SERMs, that is selective estrogen receptor modulators. So this is also very important question. Among the anti-cancer drugs, you may get even essay question, short note, I mean 2 marks questions also. And Viva also, they may ask some of the questions in pertaining to the SERMs and SERS. Okay, so please go through this topic again and again if you have any confusion. So prepare well for the exam from this topic. Selective estrogen receptor modulators. So these are the drugs with tissue selective actions. Selective action is there, but modulating action, not down-regulating action like that of the SERS. So estrogenic action or agonistic action in some tissues, anti-estrogenic action in some other tissues. So what is the objective of using SERMs? That is to produce beneficial estrogenic effects and to prevent harmful estrogenic effects. We have seen in the other slide. So estrogens do produce beneficial as well as harmful effects. So we want to take the advantage of beneficial effects and prevent the harmful effects also. So beneficial effects means they are seen in bone and liver. Harmful effects are seen in breast. Those are to be prevented with the usage of selective estrogen receptor modulators. So we have various molecules like clomiphene, tamoxifen, raloxifene, toremifene, and meloxifene. So we generally discuss about tamoxifen, raloxifene, which are the most commonly used molecule. Clomiphene is not discussed here. That is discussed in some other session. Then tamoxifen. It is a non-steroidal anti-estrogen and structurally related to diethylstilbestrol, affects G1 phase of cell cycle, has both estrogenic and anti-estrogenic effects on various tissues. Okay. Then, so estrogenic and anti-estrogenic effects are seen here. Agonistic action at uterus, bone, liver, pituitary, whereas antagonistic action at breast, blood vessel, and peripheral side. So breast carcinoma has to be nullified by using tamoxifen. Okay, so here's the mechanism of action. And agonistic action on uterus, bone, liver, pituitary, antagonistic on breast and blood vessels. So tamoxifen, when you give here, this is the anti-estrogen drug, tamoxifen molecule, that competes with the natural hormone for intracellular receptor. So whenever there is like a receptor, estrogen receptor is there, estrogen generally come and bind to the estrogen receptor producing their own actions. Whereas when we administer tamoxifen molecule, so it will go and bind competitively. It will go and bind to the estrogen receptor, so that estrogen receptors are not available for estrogen to come and bind and then act. So inactive receptor complex. So this tamoxifen is going to inactivate this estrogen receptor. Okay, that is the main mechanism of action. So agonistic action, potential tumor stimulation, generally with tamoxifen. So there is a possibility of increased risk of endometrial cancer. This agonistic action with tumor stimulation is seen not for breast but for endometrium. So breast cancer can be nullified with the usage of tamoxifen, but not the endometrial cancer. Okay, and even thromboembolic effects also. Then advantages are lower. It lowers cholesterol levels and preserves bone density. Antagonistic action means carcinoma breast area, the tumor is inhibited. And of course, it produces hot flushes, which is also very cumbersome to the patient. Then the metabolites of tamoxifen have a much stronger affinity for the receptors and are not easily displaced by circulating estradiol. Low concentrations produce cytotoxic effect. High concentrations produce cytostatic effects, low concentrations. High concentrations produce cytotoxic effect. Okay. Then estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, estrogen receptor negative breast cancer. Let us see the difference between these two. Estrogen generally combines with estrogen receptors and produces its action, whereas when you give tamoxifen, it goes and combines. Okay, so there is a possibility of cell proliferation, which is controlled by estrogen and inhibited by tamoxifen here, that we have discussed already. In negative breast cancer, there is no receptor here. So cell proliferation is not controlled by estrogen because estrogen is not going to come and combine with estrogen receptor. So there is no combination with estrogen, so not controlled by and not even inhibited by tamoxifen because there are no estrogen receptors at all. So the net effect is very dreadful. So here estrogen molecule binds to estrogen receptor, acquires conformational change. Tamoxifen binds to estrogen receptor, conformational change is not needed. Estrogen receptor binds to co-activators. So when there is excessive levels of estrogen, co-activators get stimulated in the development of cancer. But here tamoxifen, after combining with estrogen receptor, it cannot bind to co-activators. The binding ability is lost. So there is no possibility of cancer, mainly specifically in the case of breast. Tamoxifen enters the cancer cell. This is tamoxifen, blue color ones. This is green color one is estrogen receptors. So tamoxifen enters the cancer cell and binds to estrogen receptors. Okay. Here when estrogen enters the cell, it can't bind to the receptor because tamoxifen has already occupied the estrogen receptor site. So cancer cell proliferation is prevented thus. So tamoxifen as a cause of uterine cancer, how it is possible? So here let us see estrogen binding with receptor in breast cell that is blocked with the usage of tamoxifen. So tamoxifen comes and combines with the estrogen receptors present in the breast, which are so these estrogen receptors present in the breast are not activated. They are not going to get attached to the coactivators. So no breast cell proliferation, decreased cancer risk. Whereas tamoxifen gets attached to the estrogen receptor in uterine endometrial cell. But here the uterine receptor gets activated because of which endometrial cell proliferation and increased cancer risk is seen with this molecule. So unopposed estrogen hypothesis, exposure to unopposed estrogens. So spreads through uterus, fallopian tubes, ovaries, and out into even peritoneal cavity. Metastasis can be seen even through hematogenous and lymphatic spread also. See, you can see the endometrial cancer here. Then SERMs, clomiphene. It acts as antagonist at hypothalamus. We are not going to discuss about it here. Main usage is ovulation induction and ovulation in PCOS, polycystic ovarian disease. Then tamoxifen is used as agonist on bone and uterus, antagonist on breast. Indications for breast cancer. Whereas raloxifene, agonist on bone, but antagonist on both breast and uterus. So used in osteoporosis management and breast cancer. Here you can see the potential of estradiol or estrogen, tamoxifen, raloxifene. Endometrial cancer, much, and here because it blocks both the things, it is qualified. Breast cancer, here it is seen, here it is not seen, here it is not seen. Thromboembolism, same with all the molecules. And bone mass, all very good. Then tamoxifen, other actions are estrogen receptor antagonist at breast, agonist at bone, uterus, estrogen receptor agonist again, and a decreased beta cell survival and beta cell proliferation in case of pancreas, and decreased fat mass in case of adipose tissue, and then liver, decreased steatosis and decreased food intake. Then the metabolism, tamoxifen gets converted into through one path by taking CYP3A4 or 5, it is going to get converted into N-bismethyl tamoxifen, or by taking the utilization of CYP2D6, it is going to get converted to 4-hydroxytamoxifen, which is again going to get converted to endoxifen with the help of CYP3A4 or 5. And this can even get converted to endoxifen with CYP2D6. This is metabolic pathway of tamoxifen. ADR. So the ADR manifestations with the tamoxifen molecule are nausea, vomiting, alopecia, heart pressures, bone pain, hypercalcemia, venous thrombosis, atrophy of lining of vagina, agonistic action on endometrium, giving rise to endometrial hyperplasia, and amenorrhea in premenopausal women and vaginal bleeding in postmenopausal women. The dose to be given is hormonal and anti-hormonal drugs. You have to remember the dose, not the other anti-cancer drugs. You don't need to remember the dose of the drugs for other anti-cancer drugs, okay? Dose to be given is 10 to 20 mg/d and used in the management of primary therapy for metastatic breast cancer in both men and postmenopausal women. And in such case, estrogen positive tumors respond well, but negative tumors, it is still under investigation going on. Prophylactic use in women at high risk for breast cancer. This can be used. Progestin resistant endometrial carcinoma also it can be used, and ovarian carcinoma. So tamoxifen, all stages of breast cancer, pre and postmenopausal women, and metastatic breast cancer, both in case of women and men. Adjuvant therapy, palliative therapy, and primary prevention of breast cancer. Whereas in case of raloxifene, it is used for osteoporosis prevention and treatment, and risk reduction for invasive breast cancer in postmenopausal women at high risk. We don't need to bother about the other molecules. Then SCRD, that means selective estrogen receptor down regulators. They are pure anti-estrogens. Prototype drug is fulvestrant, used in the management of tamoxifen-resistant breast cancer. When that molecule does not work, we can go for SERDs. Fulvestrant, it acts as a pure antagonist at estrogen receptor, acts on estrogen receptor breast cancer cells by binding competitively to estrogen receptor. So there is inhibition of estrogen receptor dimerization, so that can interact with the DNA, so that step is prevented, and inhibits further estrogen stimulated cell division and reduces the number of estrogen receptor through degradation and downregulation. Okay, so here you can see estrogen combining with receptor binding to DNA, coactivated bind, genes are activated. So here the coactivator cannot bind because you are using anti-estrogen SERDs. Okay, so no gene activation can be seen here. So fulvestrant has a different mode of action here. Attenuated dimerization, that's what we just now discussed. So there is no transcription, no tumor cell division at all. Okay. Then comes aromatase inhibitors. There are two types of aromatase inhibitors. Number one is irreversible steroidal inhibitors. Number two is reversible non-steroidal inhibitors. This is exemestane, forms a permanent and deactivating bond with the aromatase enzyme. Whereas reversible non-steroidal inhibitors, they are anastrozole and destrozole. They inhibit the synthesis of estrogen via reversible competition for the aromatase enzyme. This is aromatase inhibitors. Okay. Then aromatase inhibitors, these are the non-steroidal drugs. Mechanism of action, they inhibit the enzyme aromatase responsible for the conversion of adrenal androgen, androstenedione to estrogen. So finally, there is the reduction in circulating levels of estrogen because there is conversion pathway aromatase enzyme is blocked. Examples of the drugs involved here are anastrozole and letrozole. Androstenedione is converted into estrogen. This step is blocked by aromatase inhibitors. This enzyme is most commonly seen in subcutaneous fat, liver, muscle, normal breast, and breast cancer. So testosterone, this is going to get converted into testosterone. Again, this is going to get converted to estradiol. So here also aromatase inhibitors are used. So this step is blocked. Whereas tamoxifen directly deals with the estrogen receptor. Aromatase inhibitors, they deal with the aromatase enzyme inhibition. Okay. The aromatization occurs in the body fat. Such estrogen synthesis may be important in the pathogenesis of breast cancer growth in postmenopausal women. So breast cancer area cases, we use this group of drugs. Aromatase inhibitors are selective in action, selective medical adrenalectomy. That means they do not inhibit synthesis of adrenal glucocorticoids. So there is no much of side effects because that action is spared. They're administered orally. ADR are normal like nausea, headache, alopecia, skin rash, hypotension, tachycardia, fatigue, hot flashes, arthralgia, bone pain, and peritoneal edema. Used in the case of tamoxifen resistant breast cancer and no apparent endometrial cancer risk with these molecules. They are used as first line drugs in the postmenopausal women to treat estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, including that which has progressed in spite of tamoxifen receptor therapy. That means tamoxifen failure. They can be combined with other drugs also. Then exemestane, steroidal hormonal compound, acts by irreversible inactivation of aromatase. That's what we discussed in the classification. Similar uses like that of other aromatase inhibitors. Then comes progestanes. Progestanes. The endometrial carcinoma in humans is believed to be due to prolonged unopposed stimulation by estrogen. So we need to combat that with progesterone administration because estrogens and progesterones are there contradictory. They have contradictory actions. So hydroxyprogesterone capreate 1 to 3 grams IM is given at weekly intervals, and megestrol acetate 40 milligrams BID are used in metastatic endometrial carcinoma. Or even medroxyprogesterone can be given 100 to 500 mg daily or orally. Both are used to treat cachexia associated with cancer and AIDS. So mechanism of action of progesterone here is progesterone administration. So this is going to get combined with progesterone receptor that is present in female genital tract and breast. So the receptor undergoes dimerization, attaches to progesterone response elements of target genes, PRE. So regulates transcription through co-activators. Regulation. Okay. Then comes androgen receptor antagonist. So we have so many classifications here, GnRH analog, steroid synthesis inhibitors like ketoconazole and spironolactone. We are not going to discuss these molecules here because they don't have any anti-cancer property. Then 5-alpha reductase inhibitors like finasteride and receptor inhibitors like flutamide. We are going to discuss. So anti-androgen therapy. If you go back to this HPA axis, hypothalamus GnRH release, anterior pituitary releases LH, reduces release testosterone. Peripheral tissue, there will be conversion of testosterone. This is testosterone secretion, then conversion to dihydroxytestosterone. Then it goes to the target organs producing actions after combining with androgen receptors or testosterone receptors. So the drugs which act here are GnRH analogs or LH analogs, which is leuprolide. So here this we are not going to discuss. Then 5-alpha reductase inhibitors like finasteride, they act here at peripheral tissues. Then flutamide, androgen receptor antagonist that acts at the level of the receptor. So non-steroidal anti-androgen binds to androgen receptor and blocks the effects of testosterone, this flutamide molecule. Used in metastatic cancer of prostate, drug does not inhibit either the production of gonadotropins or adrenocortical steroidogenesis. Because its action is only at the level of the receptor, that's it. Well absorbed orally. ADR are nausea, vomiting, loss of libido, sexual impotence, gynecomastia, heart flashes, and hepatotoxicity. Then flutamide, when used alone, it increases the production of LH because there is no negative feedback mechanism. But when there is a negative feedback mechanism, so because of it. So flutamide, when you administered along with GnRH analog, so there is combined androgen blockade. GnRH analog is also going to act, and this is going to act at the level of receptors, testosterone receptors. So combined estrogen blockade is there. Then flutamide plus GnRH analog for inoperable prostate cancer blocks the effects of testosterone. Then as flutamide blocks the inhibitory feedback of testosterone on LH secretion. Okay, the levels of plasma testosterone rise, and this partly offsets the direct beneficial effect of flutamide on prostatic cancer. This is mainly because of the negative feedback mechanism. If you go back to physiology, then you can understand. So this flutamide is going to suppress because of the receptor blockade action, testosterone levels are down. So negative feedback mechanism is lost. So LH secretion will be enhanced. So because of which the plasma testosterone again rise. And this partly offsets the direct beneficial effect in the management of prostatic cancer. So it is given in the dose of 250 mg TID for early prostatic cancer. And it is used in the management of as a sole drug in orchidectomized patients in whom it blocks the effects of adrenal androgens. And nilutamide and bicalutamide are, of course, other androgen derivatives, anti-androgen derivatives. Then comes 5-alpha reductase inhibitors. Mainly finasteride we usually use. So the mechanism of action of this molecule is it inhibits the enzyme 5-alpha reductase, which is responsible for the conversion of testosterone to more active dihydrotestosterone. Okay. So 5-alpha reductase enzyme is going to convert testosterone to 5-dihydroxytestosterone. That enzyme we are going to inhibit with the usage of finasteride molecule. Dihydroxytestosterone is an androgen that stimulates prostate growth. So it is used in the management of prostate carcinoma. So here you can see testosterone getting converted to dihydrotestosterone. So 5-alpha reductase inhibitor is used here. Okay. Same. Testosterone to 5-hydroxytestosterone inhibition with the help of this 5-alpha reductase enzyme is involved here. So finasteride is inhibiting this particular enzyme. Then GnRH or LH analogs. Leuprolide, goserelin, and naproxen. So when given in constant doses, they inhibit release of pituitary LH and FSH, maybe because of the feedback mechanism. Downregulation and desensitization of gonadal receptors suppress gonadal function, ADR organocomastia, impotence, and testicular atrophy. Okay, so constant administration, total suppression of the hormones. Okay, so because of which they can be used in the management of prostatic cancer as well as breast cancer. So you can see here, yeah, leuprolide and goserelin, synthetic GnRH derivatives. So GnRH receptor is stimulated, cell signaling LH. So it is going to give rise to testosterone and estradiol. So this is going to get blocked because of these analogs. Because synthetic agonists initially increase testosterone level like that of the LH or LH luteinizing hormone. Testosterone and estradiol synthesis is initially increased, but later decreases because of the feedback mechanism. So it can be called as pharmacological castration or ovarectomy. Okay, because we are using the drug for that purpose. So here gonadorelin, we are not going to discuss about it. Long-acting analog, that is goserelin, also used as naproxen, used as nasal spray, leuprolide. So after initial stimulation, they will cause suppression of gonadotropin, down regulation because of the feedback mechanism of FSH and LH secretion. So testosterone secretion is inhibited. So that's why it is used in the management of prostatic cancer. Here you can see leuprolide and goserelin, FSH stimulation, testis, and then here flutamide. This is antagonist at receptor level. So this is acting, reduce testosterone secretion. So prostate gland hyperplasia is nullified. Then here aromatase inhibitors, so they're not getting converted to androgens to estrogens. Tamoxifen, of course, acts at the level of the receptors. Then Aberralex, it is a GnRH antagonist, causes suppression of LH and FSH and lowers testosterone levels, so which is used in the management of advanced prostatic cancer. Somatostatin analogs, that is octreotide and lanreotide, used in carcinoid tumors. Then the last hormone, that is glucocorticoids. Example, hydrocortisone and prednisolone are used most commonly. They are used in the management of ALL in children and in malignant lymphoma due to their direct lympholytic effect. They are not useful in the management of myeloid and monocytic types of acute leukemias. They prevent the accelerated erythrocytic destruction and thus prevent anemia in disseminated cancer patients. This is the main advantage. They effectively counter the hemolytic and hemorrhagic complications that is due to thrombocytopenia, accompanying chronic lymphocytic and myeloid leukemias and malignant lymphomas. So myelosuppression can give rise to thrombocytopenia, which can give rise to hemolysis and hemorrhagic complications, that can be nullified by usage of glucocorticoid administration. Then they can be useful to treat cerebral edema due to intracranial tumor metastasis and to control hypercalcemia following cancer chemotherapy. These are the various indications of glucocorticoids in cancer chemotherapy. In critically ill patients, along with cytotoxic drugs, to produce symptomatic relief, a sense of well-being with the steroid administration, that also can be done. Because cancer patients, if you just go to the cancer ward, then it is very tough to come out of that. Even if you come out, you will have a lot of mental agony. Then preventing and treating vomiting due to chemotherapy, they can be used. Dexamethasone is an adjunctive antiemetic. And prednisolone also can be used in the dose of 60 to 100 mg daily in divided doses and then reduced to a maintenance dose of 20 to 40 mg daily. Then L-thyroxine sodium. Follicular and papillary types of thyroid carcinomas, they are dependent on TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Of course, thyroid carcinoma primary treatment is always surgical, but papillary carcinoma is very slow growing and metastasis is largely to cervical lymph nodes. Post-operatively, it has been treated lifelong with thyroids. Okay, because there is a possibility of hypothyroidism. Whereas follicular carcinoma metastasis is early and widely, fast, F for fast. So post-operatively, it is best treated with radioactive iodine. It depends on the type of the tumor based on histopathology. So glucocorticoids in nutshell used in acute childhood leukemias and lymphomas, estrogens, carcinoma prostate, which is an androgen-dependent tumor, terms like tamoxifen, estrogen antagonists used for first-line therapy for estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. 5 years of lifespan can be enhanced with this molecule. Then ADRR, hot flashes, nausea, vomiting, skin rash, potential to cause endometrial cancer, which we have already discussed. So this is just go through. I'm not going to speak about these 4 slides which I have kept, which are very good in a complete nutshell of all these anti-cancer drugs. What all we have discussed till now. List of anti-cancer drugs, their clinical uses and their common side effects. Here are whatever we have discussed. We will go through those only. You also can read about only those molecules only. Asparagines, bleomycin, busulfan, carboplatin or cisplatin that we are going to discuss in the miscellaneous category, carmostine, chlorambucil, and cisplatin. Then cladribine, cyclophosphamide, cytarabine, carbazine, diethylstilbestrol, ethanylestradiol, etoposide. Then mitomycin, mitotane, mitoxantrone, paclitaxel, pentostatin we have not discussed, plicamycin we have discussed, prednisone, procarbazole, streptozotocin we have not discussed, amoxicillin, teniposide, vinblastine, and vincristine. That's it. So you can go through those slides for a recap, fast recap. Then coming to the miscellaneous agents, platinum coordination complexes. So we have cisplatin and carboplatin. They form cross-links with DNA strands, that is the main mechanism of action. It is not an alkylating agent, but because of this cross-linking potential with the DNA strands, it is grouped under alkylating agents in some of the textbooks, but it is not. Carboplatin, it is a derivative of cisplatin with less ototoxicity, neurotoxicity, and nephrotoxicity when compared to cisplatin molecule. Okay, this is prototype platinum coordination complex given IV cisplatin. It gets converted into an active form, a potential mustard-like alkylating agent. That's why like alkylation is seen. It inhibits DNA biosynthesis and kills cells at any stage of cell cycle, non-cell cycle specific drugs. So cisplatin enters cells, forms highly reactive platinum complexes. Then interstrand and interstrand crosslinks will be there. So that's why it is sometimes classified under alkylating agent. Then DNA damage it results in, and then further inhibits cell proliferation. Then pharmacokinetics, high plasma protein binding it has with long half-life of 7 to 2 hours, concentrated in kidney, intestines, and testes, excreted through urine. ADR, marked nausea, vomiting, and anemia. Dose-related renal damage, ototoxicity, peripheral neuropathy, and myelosuppression is seen with this molecule. Aggressive hydration with saline or mannitol or furosemide is recommended, plus aggressive hydration with saline. Along with that, we need to administer mannitol or furosemide is recommended to reduce the nephrotoxicity, elimination of the toxic molecules with the usage of mannitol or furosemide. And this is to prevent dehydration. Carboplatin and oxaliplatin are newer analogs which are less toxic when compared to cisplatin. So cisplatin has got all sorts of toxicity. Ototoxicity, cardiotoxicity, nephrotoxicity, hematological toxicity, GI toxicity, hepatotoxicity, neurotoxicity. So much of toxicity with cisplatin molecule. So cisplatin treatment, cell death in tumors, so useful in anti-cancer therapy, but there is cell death in kidneys also, which is going to give rise to nephrotoxicity, acute kidney failure. It is used in the management of germ cell, colorectal, ovarian, and testicular tumors, bladder cancer, and melanoma, along with a combination of vinblastine and bleomycin, and also in the management of solid tumors like esophageal, gastric, and lung cancers. Then comes hydroxyurea, otherwise known as hydroxycarbamide. It mainly acts by inhibiting the enzyme ribonucleoside diphosphate reductase, which is responsible for the conversion of ribonucleotides to deoxyribonucleotides. So it mainly acts at this S phase. So S phase is blocked with this molecule. It inhibits myeloproliferation and normalizes the platelet count. 100% absorbed from the gut. Very good point regarding this molecule. So ribonucleotides getting converted to deoxyribonucleotides with the help of ribonucleoside diphosphate reductase. This enzyme is going to be blocked by the hydroxyurea. So this is not formed, so whole DNA synthesis is inhibited. ADR myelosuppression, of course, minimal. Then hypersensitivity, hyperglycemia, hypoalbuminemia, used in CML, polycythemia, and psoriasis. So same thing that we have discussed: leukopenia, megaloblastic anemia, myelosuppression disease. And general manifestations like GI disturbances, skin reactions, stomatitis, alopecia, and neurological manifestations. Used in the management of myeloproliferative disorders, chronic granulocytic leukemia, polycythemia vera, thrombocytosis, and sickle cell anemia. Then comes anagrelide, which is a phosphodiesterase inhibitor, which is administered orally. The main mechanism of action of this molecule is it inhibits megakaryocytes maturation to platelets and causes lowering of platelets. Thus, it helps to prevent thrombosis in primary thrombocythemia and polycythemia. That is the main mechanism. So ADR, headache, palpitation, cardiac arrhythmia, and fluid retention, used in CML. Then mitotane, structurally related to the insecticide DDT, gets selectively concentrated in the adrenal cortex and acts as adrenolytic. Okay. ADR, common like anorexia, nausea, diarrhea, somnolence, and lethargy, uses like Cushing syndrome due to adrenocortical carcinoma because it has got adrenolytic potential. Then abiraterone acetate, oral agent used in the treatment of metastatic castration or resistant variety of prostatic cancer. It is used in conjunction with prednisone to inhibit the CYP17 enzyme, an enzyme required for androgen synthesis, resulting in reduced testosterone production. Co-administered with prednisolone is required to help lessen the effects of mineralocorticoid excess resulting from CYP17 inhibition. This is not that routinely asked this molecule for your examination. ADR, hepatotoxicity, hypertension, hypokalemia, fluid retention, joint and muscle discomfort, heart pressures, and diarrhea. Then enzalutamide. This is a oral agent that works at the level of androgen signaling pathway in the treatment of metastatic castrate-resistant prostatic cancer. See, prostatic cancer itself has got various modalities of treatment with various drugs. In patients that have previously received docetaxel chemotherapy. Okay, when there is failure, then you can go for this molecule. It inhibits the binding of androgen to receptors and inhibits androgen receptor nuclear translocation and interaction with DNA. That's how DNA synthesis is inhibited. ADR, asthenia, back pain, fluid retention, and risk of seizure. Then drug interactions, multiple drug interactions potentially exist as this drug is a strong inducer of CYP3A4 uh, and a moderate inducer of CYP 2C9 and 2C9D. Then comes radioactive isotopes. Main mechanism of action of these radioactive isotopes are they have the physical property of emitting beta and gamma radiation. So because of which there is ionization in the cells, then which can lead to disruption of the cellular metabolism and finally cellular destruction. So therapeutically useful radioisotopes are iodine-131 and radiophosphorus. Then comes radioiodine. It is administered orally, acts by emitting beta radiation, concentrated by the thyroid gland and causes acinar destruction. It is highly selective. Its systemic toxicity is minimal. So this is thyroid carcinomas. We can go for radiotherapy, not radiotherapy, using of radioiodine. It is useful in case of thyroid carcinoma, which can concentrate enough radioiodine, like thyroid follicular carcinoma. That's what we discussed. Papillary carcinoma, it is a slow growing tumor. It doesn't need any radiation. So follicular carcinoma being the fastest spreading tumor, we can go ahead with radioiodine administration. Then thyroid carcinoma, surgery followed by radioiodine. During radioiodine therapy, the patient must be isolated in special arrangements made for disposal of urine in order to reduce the possible radiation hazard to other people. Any kind of radiotherapy, we need to keep the point in mind and we need to educate the patient also. Then radioactive phosphorus. Radioactive phosphorus is a beta emitting isotope. It is metabolized by the body like a stable phosphorus and is distributed in different tissues in proportion to their total phosphorus content. It is taken up rapidly by those cells where the metabolic turnover of phosphorus is high. That is like multiplying cells, bone marrow cells, spleen cells, and lymph node cells. So this radioactive phosphorus is taken up by those cells. So if the patient is having carcinoma in those areas, then this molecule can be used. So deposited in bones and is incorporated in nucleoproteins of growing cells. ADR, because of its wide distribution, causes generalized body irradiation, including that of lungs, GI tract, and gonads. Excessive irradiation of bone marrow can cause like myelosuppression, that is giving rise to leukopenia, thrombocytopenia, and anemia, administered in the form of sodium phosphate 32, oral or IV administration. And it is used in the management of polycythemia vera, where there is excessive RBC production. Oral administration suppresses the production of RBCs, platelets, and leukocytes, and thus reduces the risk of thrombosis. That is another action. As it is leukemogenic, it is now rarely used. Okay, and whenever there is such kind of adverse effect, then we can go ahead with repeated phlebotomy. Then comes stem cell transplantation, another innovative techniques for the cancer chemotherapy. Stem cell transplant means it replaces the damaged, affected blood cells with healthy stem cells. The damaged cells are removed, healthy cells are injected. These stem cells are capable of giving rise to new blood cells used in the management of leukemias, lymphomas, and myelomas. You can see here the picture in a stem cell transplant. Blood is drawn from the patient or a donor, not patient, a donor. Stem cells are harvested from the blood, normal healthy person. Then here, radiation or high-dose chemotherapy eliminates cancer cells, of course. After that, we can introduction of healthy stem cells into the blood replenishes the immune system again. This is stem cell transplantation. Okay. Then gene therapy. It is a technique for correcting the defective genes that are responsible for cancer development. So we are going to correct the defective genes. Uses carriers to transfer the genes called as vectors. Most commonly, virus vectors are used in combination with radiotherapy. You can see here from the patient, cells are removed from a patient. Here, the next step. In the laboratory, a virus is altered so that it cannot reproduce. So the virus is made like that. Then a gene is inserted into that virus. The altered virus with that particular gene introduction is mixed with cells from the patient. So this is virus with modified gene, and this is the cells from the patient. They both are clubbed together. Cloning has to be happened. The cells from the patient become genetically altered, and then again, so with the genetically altered cells because of the immunomodulation, then those cells are again injected into the patient. That is gene therapy, modified gene therapy. So action of vectors at the level of the cells of the injected organ. See, this is the vector. Okay. Entry of the new gene into the nucleus happens with the molecule, this vector molecule. Then cancer vaccines at the end. Cancer vaccine preparation. How they are going to prepare this cancer vaccine? Cancer vaccines are made from the person's own cancer cells, from the patient itself, or from cells that are grown in the laboratory also. When cancer cells are treated with heat or irradiation, they become inactive and can be used for vaccine preparation, because live cancer cells, not inactive, not which are not in inactive state, they are not supposed to be get again injected. There is no meaning in it. Certain proteins may then be taken from cancer cells and used to prepare cancer vaccine, protein vaccine. There are various types of 4 to 5 types of cancer vaccines are there, which I'm not going to discuss here because it is not for MBBS students. So cancer cells are removed from the patient. Irradiation of the cancer cells, modified gene is introduced. Genetic modification of cancer cells, again those cells are introduced. Okay, so cellular proliferating capacity is lost with these cells. Apart from that, there is enhanced immune response within the body because of the genetical alteration. That is the main advantage with this. So you can see here autologous cancer cells from the patient and laboratory cancer cells, that is from by taking animal experimentation. So you can see cancer cells, then cell lysate is formed. So here peripheral blood mononuclear cells, unactivated dendritic cells are formed. Then activated, they are into activated dendritic cells. So cancer vaccine is prepared here ultimately by taking either of the methods of cells. Then this vaccine is subcutaneously injected into the patient with the genetic modification. Then comes prophylactic vaccine. Cervarix vaccine, HPV type 16 and 18 is used in the management of cervical carcinoma. This cancer vaccines can be used as 4 marks questions, or just name any 2 or 3 or 4 cancer vaccines, maybe like 2 marks questions also you may be asked, or even in viva voce. Then Gardasil vaccine, which denotes HPV types 6, 11, 16 and 18, human papillomavirus HPV, used in the management or prevention, not management of, because we have prophylactic and therapeutic vaccines also. This is prophylactic vaccine. So prevention of cervical, vulval, vaginal and anal cancer. Engerix B, that is hepatitis B virus, used in the prevention of liver cancer. Then comes therapeutic vaccines. Provenge vaccine, used for prostatic cancer. Oncovax, that is autologous vaccine for stage 3 colon cancer. And Onivax, that is anti-idiotype monoclonal antibody vaccine for colorectal adenocarcinoma. So cancer vax, that is for melanoma 3rd stage. Ervoy, that is ipilimumab, that is for melanoma. NY-ESO1 peptide vaccine, that is for soft tissue sarcoma stage 2 to 4. Then prevention of cancer, let us see. After discussing about all these things, starting from the etiology up to the level of the highly chemotoxic, powerful chemotoxic drugs, which can give so much of toxicity to the body of the patient, more than even the disease cancer itself. So it is always to think about, like, prevention is always better than cure. So what can we think about it? How can we educate the patients, even the public also? How can we educate? Chemo prevention. What is this chemo prevention? Again, we are here, we are using the chemical molecules which can be used to prevent the cancer development in the body. Some vitamins and derivatives and dietary micronutrients may inhibit the development of cancers. Example, beta-carotene, isotretinoin, folic acid, ascorbic acid, and alpha-tocopherol. Then isotretinoin appears to prevent secondary primary squamous cell carcinoma of head and neck also. Then anti-estrogen, tamoxifen, when used along with as an adjuvant therapy in women undergoing surgery or surgery for primary breast cancer, was shown to reduce the risk of cancer occurring in the contralateral breast. So chemoprevention to the other breast. Okay. This oral agent with few unwanted effects is now being tested in women at high risk of developing breast cancer as a chemopreventive strategy. Even the healthy women who don't get, who has not or already not yet got the breast cancer, but there is a genetic history, inheritatory. So then we can think about using this molecule. Then adrenocortical steroids destroy lymphocytes, reduce inflammation, and impair phagocytosis. Cytotoxic agents destroy immunologically competent cells. So azathioprine molecule, a prodrug for the purine antagonist metacaptopurine, is used in autoimmune disease because it provides enhanced immunosuppressive activity. These also can be used. Then some alkylating agents like cyclophosphamide and chlorambucil, anti-lymphocyte immunoglobulin. They cause non-specific immunosuppression so that the general defenses of the body against infection are impaired. So, because of this chemo prevention is not at all advisable because they molecule, they may prevent the cancer development within the body, but they themselves, they do have the high toxic potential. So that is going to derange the normal metabolism in the body. Okay. Then primary prevention. So this is advisable. Reduction of exposure to sun, then physical inactivity and dietary factors. If you go back to the etiological factors, whatever that we have discussed in the first session of the cancer disease in detail, so all these we have discussed. So they are all going to be like taken proper care. Food, drugs, and cosmetics should be tested for carcinogens. Improvement in personal hygiene, preventing the various infections like hepatitis B and C infections, human papilloma virus infections, all sorts of whatever that we have discussed, virus, bacteria, fungi, etc. Then control of tobacco and alcohol consumption. This is most common in our country. So control, this is a question mark, control of tobacco and alcohol consumption. It is like control or total stoppage. So then only we can think about cancer incidence coming to zero level. Reduction of exposure to amount of radiation, because radiotherapy itself is giving rise to cancers because of their radio mutagenic potential. Protecting workers from exposure to industrial carcinogens. This is somewhat can be thought about. Control of environmental pollution. This we can target about. Early detection and prompt treatment of precancerous lesions. This is to be paid much attention, especially most commonly seen with breast cancer, because of which even though incidence of breast cancer regarding breast cancer, it is taking the second position, but when it comes to the mortality rate, it is not taking the second position because of the early detection and prompt treatment in our country. Then legislation, of course. Then secondary prevention, cancer registration, hospital-based and population-based, this has to be done. Then early detection of cases and then prompt treatment. Then regarding the food, antioxidants in the food need to be raised up so that the cancer can be prevented. It prevents antioxidants, they prevent and or scavenge free radicals. They can detoxify even carcinogens also, like vitamin A, E, C, vegetables and fruits, etc. You can see here the various steps. Anti-cancer superfoods, they are like turmeric. If you can use, women can cook while cooking, when they can use excessive amount of turmeric, then that is going to have anti-cancer property. Then garlic, then this is lemon, then cruciferous vegetables, legumes, berries, and then nuts like almonds. Then the steps to prevent cancer, to educate the public and even for ourselves also, don't use tobacco and don't go for alcohol. Not just reducing or controlling, but complete elimination. Protect your skin from excessive exposure to the sun. Eat a healthy diet, not by junk food and all that. Maintain a healthy weight and be physically active. If you don't go for outside food, then this can be maintained very easily. Practice safer sex and avoid risky behaviors for AIDS-related carcinomas. Get immunized HPV, hepatitis vaccines, prevention role. Know your family medical history and get regular cancer screenings, especially for mammography. That can be advised for breast cancer. Hereditary history is there, then you have to advise the patient to go for every 6 months or once in every year. The mammography has to be repeated. Then be a healthy weight, not being too obese, physically active. Be a diet rich of whole grains, vegetables, fruits, and beans. And then limit consumption of fast foods. That's what we have discussed just now. And red and processed meat also limit consumption. Limit consumption of sugar sweetened drinks. Then limit, not limit, absolutely stop alcohol consumption. Do not use supplements for cancer prevention. Then for mothers, breastfeed your baby if you can. This is not possible in the current generation. This is need to be paid. If you feed the baby with your breast, then you're not going to get cancer. After a cancer diagnosis, follow recommendations if you can, like follow-ups. Then last but not the least, this is very, very important. Please pay attention. Cancer cures unproven remedies. So long as conventional medicine cannot cure all patients with cancer, some will be willing to try anything that they think might help. Okay, so you must have seen some of your relatives or distant friends sometimes, like they are suffering from cancer. Even when you go to the oncology department, cancer wars, you may see so many people. But more than the disease, they suffer from the drug-induced toxicity because of the usage of cytotoxic drugs. So they don't want to, they can't tolerate whether it is chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So they want to try for alternative therapy. Okay. So many patients use unproven methods, including complementary medicine, like Ayurveda, homeopathy, and all this. Unani. Unani, I don't know much about naturopathy, all this. A prominent remedy was latril, a preparation of apricot seeds, which contains amygdalin, a glucoside, which incorporates cyanide. It relieves pain. This lateral drug, which is seen, this is like a preparation of apricot seeds. It is made from apricot seeds. You know, this apricot seeds contain vitamin B17. You must be aware of this theory in your theory, vitamin B17 theory, which is going to be helpful in the prevention of cancer. So there is a controversy regarding this, but I'll tell you both the controversies, positive and negative. So it relieves, whenever you use this molecule, it relieves pain, prolongs survival, and even induces complete remission of cancer. I'm not speaking these points from unauthentic areas. This extraction is from authentic therapeutic books of pharmacology. Okay, so let us see the practicality regarding this. So they may even induce the complete remission of cancer along with relieving the pain and even prolonging survival. So benefit was reported to result from release of cyanide in the body. So these apricot seeds also contain, along with vitamin B17, that is released because of the cyanide that is present in the seed, which was claimed to kill cancer cells, but not normal cells, which is not seen with cytotoxic chemotherapy. Okay. So is it that we can say that absolutely it is safe? So here, 11-month, there is one single report that has been reported, that is 11-month-old girl died after swallowing tablets, that is 1 to 5 tablets around, being used by her father due to metabolic formation of hydrocyanic acid in the cyanide, in the intestine. So cyanide is getting converted into hydrocyanic acid, because of which the girl died immediately after taking 1 to 5 tablets. There is no serious evidence that lateral is effective, because the study clinical trials are not being done completely. Some of the studies are done, some have promoted that study, and it was not approved by FDA. That is a question mark. So interestingly, despite criticism of over-pessimistic laxity of the Drug Regulatory Authority, FDA, in the USA, the public is unwilling to accept the opinion of the FDA when it advises against the use of drugs such as lateral. Public want to use in United States of America, even though FDA has not released that molecule. It has not given the green signal for that molecule. It is important that these interventions be tested for efficacy and toxicity in the same way as conventional drugs are subjected to rigorous clinical trials. Because when we see each and every drug that we study under pharmacology is having some or the other side effects, some are having major dreadful effects, which are not even banned in some of the countries, especially in India. So the studies are, it is a question mark whether the studies on this are lateral are inadequate or they are not promoted. That is a big question mark. So here we can see, I would like to just tell you one thing here. Uh, it is, these are the references from a book, very wonderful book, that is World Without Cancer, which is written by an American scientist, that is Edward Griffin. So he has written in detail everything about this vitamin B17 therapy in the management of cancer. Okay. So the history started in 1922. So where they could see at Himalayas a group of people who are known as Hinja. So they're not having any chronic diseases like no hypertension, no diabetes mellitus, no cancer, nothing like that. So the scientists from various countries have gone there and they have done the clinical trials upon them. What is the reason for that? Starting from the etiological factors. So they have done research for almost 4 to 5 years from various countries, not only at the level of Himalayas, and even the villages of United States of America and UK also, some groups are there, some groups of people, village kind of people are there, where also they could find out that those people are not suffering from chronic diseases, especially that of cancer. So they have done research, thorough research for 4 to 5 years. So they could find out that all these people are having apricot seed as their staple diet, which is containing cyanide, which is going to get released in the body and is going to kill the cancer cells. So there is no, even if the cancer like tumorigenic potential is there in the body, these apricot seeds, after entering into the body, they are going to kill the malignant cells, but not the normal cells. That is the advantage with this one, staple diet. Okay, so these people, they used to take oil from these seeds and then they used to use that oil for cooking even. That is another thing that they have observed. And you know, especially for the young girls, the advantage of using this oil is the girls were looking more younger, especially the women, and their hair was looking very, very, very good. Of course, we are not going to discuss about this cosmetic properties of this compound, but we are going to discuss about the preventary medicine for the cancer, chemoprophylactic therapy. So, along with that, they are using this apricot fruit as a staple diet. Along with that, there were other features that they could find out in this 4 to 5 years long research studies. They had unpolluted and uncontaminated food being born in the villages. They don't get exposed to the junk food. Of course, even villages nowadays, they are also going for junk food. So no contamination, food contamination, no food additives and processors and all these are not involved in that. Then, especially the people who were living in and around Himalayas, they were taking pure water. There are no environmental toxins at all. No pesticides, no fertilizers used in foods. They're taking pure food and pure water. Okay. So that these are the some of the other reasons why they could not see cancer in these patients. There is a very wonderful point that we need to think about it. Then what are the other foods which are rich in vitamin B17? If we think that FDA says that, okay, apricots contain cyanide, it will release in the body and will have natural cytotoxic property to the malignant cells, but not to the tumor cells. But that cyanide may be toxic to the people also. Even if death one person is dying, then the person is dying. So is there any alternative where we can get vitamin B17, but there is no death because of the cyanide? So the foods which are rich in that kind of vitamin B17 are apple seeds. Of course, they also contain cyanide. Apart from that, pumpkin seeds, bitter almonds, and then blackthorn grass. It has got very rich content of vitamin B17. So pumpkin seeds anyway we can take. Okay, that is one thing. And animals, they have in the research they have seen that animals which have eaten this blackthorn grass, and people who are eating those animals, they didn't get exposed to cancer. That is another theory that they have come across. So that is another one. So no other carcinogens apart from this staple diet, which is rich of vitamin B17. So they were having even lifespan getting increased from 85 to 100 years. Even maximum was, it was in those areas, the maximum lifespan was 165 years. That was another thing. So this research was done by in 1960s. It started in 1922. Yeah, 22. And it was done by, elaborative research was done by Americans and Africans, and even in UK also they have done the research. But mainly Nobel laureates have done the research from UK and United States of America. But ultimately, because of one death report of that 11-year-old girl, FDA did not approve that drug. But it didn't mean that other drugs didn't have that drastic, dreadful cytotoxicity that they can produce. Okay, so this is what I just want to give you the information. Whether you agree with this controversial theory of vitamin B17 in the prevention of cancer or not, but you should have some details about it, whether you follow this therapy or not. So that's what I just wanted to share these few points with. So with this, we have finished the third session of anti-cancer drugs. Fourth session is only specifically, we have finished almost all the drugs. Only one drug group, that is target therapy of cancer chemotherapy. That is very, 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 very important and very tough to understand. Some of the students ask me to focus much on that topic because they're not able to understand the mechanisms of actions and nothing. So, okay, so I have segregated that topic separately. So I'm going to present it in the next session, that is fourth session. So please go through it. So I have made it very, very simple, collecting the matter from the various standard textbooks. Okay. If you find any doubts, then you can contact me as usual personally. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Vananda.